terrifying. Imagine one day you discover that a luxurious seaside resort, where shimmering lights dance across gentle waves, is hiding a dark secret 68 lives swallowed by the fifth storm of the year. What would you do? A powerful wife with a perfect smile insists that her husband and the workers simply left to seek new opportunities. But in the shadows of a warehouse, the stench of chemicals and scraps of blood-stained fabric whisper a different story. How far can greed and power push a mother, a businesswoman, to become utterly ruthless? Join Whispers in the Dark as we unravel a shocking case where truth was buried beneath the waves, yet justice refuses to drown. Before we dive into this chilling mystery, don't forget to subscribe to Secret Chronicles and hit the like button. Every subscription, like, and share is a tremendous gift of encouragement that helps the channel continue bringing powerful stories to you every day. And there's no greater joy than receiving your love and support. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or tell us where you're listening from. Now, let us step together into this hidden tale. Friends, picture this. One day you stand before a luxury resort, its glittering lights reflecting across the ocean, but you feel a cold breath, as if death itself lingers in the air. A man disappears without a trace, along with 67 workers swallowed by the sea. His wife, a commanding businesswoman, calmly says they all left for better opportunities. Yet in the salty breeze, a strange chemical odor hangs, hinting at a secret no one dares to touch. Today, we lead you into a story that shakes the soul. 68 lives lost beneath the fifth storm of the year, and a merciless truth waiting to be revealed. It was late October 2023. The storm had just swept through when Hung, a rugged man working at the fishing port, came to his brother Nam's resort. The sky still hung heavy with gray clouds. Leftover winds rattled the palm trees along the shore. The resort, with its pristine white buildings and lavish pools, had lost its former splendor. A hollow emptiness hovered over the place as though its spirit had been drained. Hung stood at the gate, staring at the glittering sign that bore the resort's name, while his heart tightened with dread. Nam, his elder brother always so dedicated to managing the place, had not made contact for over a month. No calls, no messages, just a chilling absence. And with him, 67 workers had vanished as if they had never existed. Stepping inside, Hunung's sandy shoes left prints on the polished stone path. The remaining staff avoided his eyes, moving silently like ghosts. His gaze fell upon a small truck parked in a shadowed corner near the beach. Once used by Nam to transport supplies for the resort, it now sat abandoned, its body streaked with rust, crusted with a thin film of sea salt. Hung ran his hand across the door, feeling the coarse salt bite into his fingertips. A wave of unease rose within him. "Where is Nam?" he asked a nearby worker, his voice low but edged with tension. The young staff member, a man named Dorng, flinched slightly before mumbling. "He went on a business trip, I think." The vague reply, coupled with his averted gaze, fell to Hung like an invisible curtain separating him from the truth. He stepped into the main office, where light from the crystal chandeliers glittered across the marble floor, yet the room exuded a lifeless chill, as if all vitality had been drained away. Family photographs still sat on Nam's desk, Nam smiling brightly beside his wife and two young children, but now that smile seemed distant, like a memory lost to another time. Hung brushed his hand across the frame, his heart heavy. He remembered Nam's excited phone calls, his voice brimming with passion as he described expansion plans for the resort. But now, there was no sign at all that he was even alive. Turning to another worker, a young woman named Lin, who was wiping down tables, Hung asked, "Have you seen Nam recently?" Lin froze, her eyes flashing with panic before she answered. "Mrs. Land said he went abroad on a business trip with the other workers." I blow. The repetition of the same line, as though rehearsed, deepened Hunung's unease. He stepped outside toward the beach, where waves rolled steadily onto the white sand. A sharp chemical odor, not like salt air or the ocean breeze, hit his nose. It drifted from an old warehouse tucked behind a row of palms, where Lan had recently installed a large tank she claimed was for high-tech seafood farming. Approaching cautiously, Hung studied the structure. The tank was solid concrete, chest high, with a gleaming metal lid. But the closer he got, the stronger the stench became, as though something was being concealed inside. He rapped his knuckles lightly on the lid. A dull, hollow sound echoed back, not the resonance of seawater, but of something unsettlingly empty. His heart raced, a chill crawled up his spine. "What's this tank for?" he demanded of a gardener nearby. The man, Twun, hesitated. "Mrs. Lan said it's for raising shrimp, but I'm not too sure." Twin's evasive tone only sharpened Hunung's suspicion. Determined, he set out to confront Lan, his brother's powerful wife. Lan, a wealthy businesswoman who owned not only the resort but a portfolio of properties across the island, stood in the outdoor dining area, confidently directing her staff. Her sharp eyes, jet black hair tied in a neat bun, and expensive attire radiated authority. When Hung approached, she smiled faintly, as if nothing were amiss. "Hung, it's been a while," she said, her voice soft but devoid of warmth. "Where's Nam?" Hung cut straight to the point, unwilling to play along. Lan paused, her gaze sweeping over him as though sizing him up. "Nam went abroad on business with the 67 workers. They're looking for new opportunities overseas." "What's so strange about that?" Her answer was too smooth, too polished, like a speech rehearsed long before. A shiver crept through Hunung's chest, cold and unshakable. 68 people vanished and you're not worried?" Hunung's voice cracked with suspicion. Lan only shrugged, the smile on her lips unchanged. "They wanted to leave. I didn't stop them. Nam said he needed new space." Hung could hardly believe his ears. Nam was not the kind of man to abandon his family, his work, or the resort he had poured his soul into. He always sent messages to their mother when traveling, always called Hung from afar to ask about the fishing port. And now, no trace, no message at all. Staring into Lan's eyes, he searched for a flicker of genuine emotion, but all he found was a chilling coldness. He thought of Nam's 2 children innocent, still believing their father was far away on business. Yet something in Lan's voice, in her calculated calm, felt like standing at the edge of a black abyss. Hung stepped out of the restaurant. The setting sun painted his face in gold, but could not chase away the weight pressing on his chest. He returned to the tank near the beach, where the acrid stench of chemicals still hung in the air. There, he noticed something strange: discarded wine bottles in a trash bin near the warehouse. They were the same expensive kind Nam used to serve VIP guests. A few still held dregs of liquid, and the chemical odor from the tank seemed to mingle with the scent of wine. A horrifying thought flashed across Hung's mind. What if Nam and the workers had never left at all? What if something had happened to them here, inside the resort itself? Fong, a senior manager at the resort, long known for his loyalty to Lan, passed by. His sharp eyes carried a murky quality, as though hiding something. When Hung asked about Nam, Fong smirked faintly. Nam must be busy. Mrs. Lan said he'll be in touch soon. But his refusal to meet Hunung's gaze, his hurried exit, spoke louder than words. Hung remembered whispers of tension between Fong and Nam over how the resort was run. There were even rumors that Lan favored Fong more than was proper. Was Fong complicit in Nam's disappearance, or merely a pawn in Lan's greater scheme? Standing silently before the tank, Hung let his eyes sweep over every detail. The ocean waves crashed onto the shore, carrying the salt-stained breath of the sea, yet they could not wash away the reek of chemicals that clung to him. He pressed his hand against the cold metal lid, and a terrifying intuition surged through him. If Nam and 67 workers never left the island, could they be here, hidden beneath the flawless facade of the resort? It felt like stepping into a labyrinth with no way out, where each answer only led to darker questions. Hung knew he could not stop, not now. However dreadful the truth, he had to uncover it for his brother, for the vanished workers, and for justice itself. Under a blazing red sunset, waves crashed against the shore, carrying the bitter breath of the sea. But nothing could wash away the creeping dread that wrapped itself tightly around Hung. Hung stood before the mysterious tank near the beach, where the acrid stench of chemicals hung in the air like a silent warning. The luxury resort, once alive with swaying palms and shimmering lights, now seemed to conceal a terrible secret. His chest tightened as though gripped by an invisible hand, each breath heavier than the last as he thought of Nam, his brother, and the 67 workers who had vanished without a trace. Lan's smooth words, spoken with the poise of a powerful sister-in-law, did nothing to ease the storm of suspicion boiling inside him. She claimed they had left to seek new opportunities, but why had no one left a single message? Why was the resort, once echoing with laughter, now so eerily silent? Hung walked slowly around the warehouse, his sharp eyes scanning every detail. The building's gray concrete walls and rust-stained iron door were hidden behind a row of trees, as though deliberately concealed from view. The massive tank, solidly built with a polished metal lid, hardly resembled a place for breeding seafood as Lon had claimed. Bending down, he pressed his hand against the cold surface of the lid, feeling a strange vibration like something beneath was struggling to break free. He drew a deep breath, but instead of salt air or the freshness of the sea, a sharp chemical odor stabbed at his senses, forcing him to squint. It was unlike anything he had smelled while working at the fishing port. It reeked of decomposition, of something buried beneath the concrete. He tapped the lid lightly. The hollow, empty thud echoed back, sounding less like water below and more like a void. His heart pounded. Is this tank really for raising shrimp? He wondered. But instinct screamed otherwise. Scanning the area, he spotted a pile of old plastic drums stacked in a corner. Some still bore streaks of dried, dark brown liquid stains that looked disturbingly like blood. Nearby, a small boat, the type used to ferry tourists offshore to see coral reefs, lay abandoned on the sand. Its mooring rope dangled loose, as if it had never been tied properly. Hung stepped closer. On the deck, strange stains spread across the surface, as though someone had tried and failed to scrub something away. He touched the marks, feeling the rough mix of sand and dried residue beneath his fingers. Again, the stench of chemicals drifted from the tank, blending grotesquely with the salty sea air until he had to fight back a wave of nausea. Returning to the resort, Hung resolved to press the remaining staff for answers. He spotted Lin, the cleaning worker he had spoken to earlier, hurrying toward the back of the warehouse with a trash bin. Her hands trembled as she dumped its contents. Hu Nung's eyes narrowed. Among the garbage lay empty wine bottles, the same expensive brand Nam had always reserved for VIP guests. But what chilled him most was that some bottles still held cloudy liquid inside, reeking of the same chemicals from the tank. Lin, where did these bottles come from? Hung asked, his voice calm but his gaze sharp as a blade. Startled, Lin dropped one of the bottles onto the sand with a clatter. I don't know. Mrs. Land told me to throw them out. Probably from some party, she stammered, before rushing away as if terrified of further questions. Her reaction only deepened Hu Nung's suspicions. A party? But Nam was never the type to host lavish gatherings, especially not when the resort was struggling financially, as Hung had heard him complain over the phone. Hu Nung's gaze shifted to Fong, the senior manager who always lingered close to Lon. Fong stood by the parking lot, speaking into his phone in a hushed tone. The moment he noticed Hung, he abruptly hung up and forced a strained smile. Still here, Hung? Found anything interesting? Fong asked, his voice coated with false friendliness, but his eyes were cold, probing. Hung didn't answer right away. Instead, he shot back. Fong, what do you know about that tank outside? Land says it's for shrimp, but it doesn't add up. Fong shrugged, his smile unchanged. Mrs. Land always has her reasons. Don't trouble yourself. Nam is probably busy overseas. But the smoothness of his tone, the evasiveness in his eyes, it was like smashing against an impenetrable wall. Hung recalled the rumors. Heated arguments between Fong and Nam over how to manage the resort, and Lan's uncanny habit of defending Fong, even when he was clearly at fault. Did Fong know more than he dared reveal? Or was he merely shielding a darker secret for Lan? Returning to the tank, Hung crouched low, examining the ground more carefully. Strange marks cut across the sand dragged impressions, as if something heavy had been pulled from the warehouse down toward the shoreline. The tracks ended at the water's edge, vanishing into the tide. He touched the sand. It felt damp in an unnatural way, not from seawater, but as though something had been poured there. He stood slowly, his eyes scanning the darkening beach. The sunset had bled into a crimson sky, fading into nightfall that wrapped the resort in oppressive shadows, as though the ocean itself whispered forbidden secrets. Hung lingered at the shoreline, moonlight tracing the tense lines of his face, every muscle tightened by the weight of suspicion. His thoughts churned, Len's trembling confession, the blood-stained fabric hidden in the warehouse, and above all, Nam's haunting note. Lan, you've changed. I'm afraid of everything now. The words sliced into Huang's mind like knives. He knew then he was touching the edge of something monstrous, a truth Lan had buried beneath her polished exterior. But what could drive a wealthy woman, a mother of two, to destroy her husband and 67 innocent workers? Hunung's chest constricted, yet the answer lay somewhere within these walls. He would find it no matter the cost. Resolute, he stepped back into the office. Cold neon light fell across Nam's desk, where stacks of files, invoices, and business plans sat as though their owner had only just stepped away. Hung opened the notebook, flipping through meticulous notes about expanding the resort until he froze at the final page. Nam's handwriting sprawled across it, shaky, desperate. Lan wants to control everything. She is no longer the woman I once knew. A sharp pain gripped Hung's chest. His brother, ever optimistic, ever devoted, had sensed something was wrong. But why hadn't he acted sooner? Hung slipped the notebook into his pocket. He knew what he had to do. He would confront Lan again, directly, though he understood she would never yield easily. Out by the open air bar, Lan stood bathed in the soft glow of lamps, wine glasses glittering under the dim light. She looked every inch the queen of her domain, calm, commanding, untouchable. And Hung, clutching the truth in his pocket, walked toward her. She sat perched on a high chair, her silk dress clinging to her frame, radiating an aura of irresistible power. But when Hung approached, her eyes flashed cold, like a predator sensing danger. Lan, Hung spoke, his voice tight with restraint but edged with accusation. I found Nam's notebook. He wrote that you've changed, that you're trying to control everything. How do you explain that? Lan set her wine glass down, her thin lips curving into an unreadable smile. Hung, you really do worry too much. Nam often scribbled strange things when work pressure got to him. I'm his wife. Everything I do is for this family. Her voice was gentle, but to Hung it sounded like a delicate veil stretched over a blade. He stepped closer, locking his eyes on hers. And what about the party before the storm? Lin said you mixed something into the wine and that a boat left the dock that night. What were you carrying out to sea? His words shattered the calm like a stone tossed into still water. A flicker rippled across Lan's face, but she quickly regained her poise. Rising from her seat, she closed the space between them, lowering her voice. Lin? She's just a lowly worker always making things up for attention. As for the boat, it was full of waste. I had it taken offshore so it wouldn't pollute the resort. Believe what you like, but don't accuse me of crimes. Hung clenched his fists, feeling as though he were striking against steel. Yet for a fleeting moment, he had caught it, the panic in Lan's eyes. Proof that he was on the right trail. Then, a voice cut through the tension. Mr. Hung, what are you doing here? It was Durng, the young employee. His worried eyes darted between them. Once loyal to Nam, he now seemed torn between his old master and the fearsome power Lan held over everyone. Durng, what do you know about that night of the storm? Hung asked, his voice low but piercing. Durng lowered his head, hands twisting nervously. I only heard Mrs. Lan say everything had been handled, that Mr. Nam and the workers left after the party. But I saw Fong take the boat out. There were strange noises below deck. Hung's blood surged. What kind of noises? Dong stepped back, his voice trembling, like groans. Human, maybe. But the storm was so loud, I can't be sure. Mrs. Lan told me not to ask questions. The words struck Hung like a freezing wind. He turned back to Lon, fury blazing in his eyes. You hear that? Groans. Human voices on the boat you sent out. What do you have to say now? Lan stood tall, unflinching, but her hand gripped her wineglass so tightly her knuckles turned white. Hung, your imagination is running wild. That storm was fierce. Could have been the waves, the wind, and you take the word of a boy like Dung over me? She turned her gaze to Durng, her voice honeyed but sharp as a knife. Be careful what you say, Durng. Jobs here aren't easy to come by. Durng paled, retreating. Hung realized then Lan was not only threatening him, but bending everyone around her to her will. He turned to leave the bar, but just as he did, something caught his eye. A small necklace, engraved with Nam Mai. It lay forgotten on the counter, a fragment of his brother's past. Mai, Nam's former lover, had once been the center of Lan's jealousy. Hung picked it up, a chill running through him. This was no accident. He resolved to find Mai another piece of the puzzle. But first, he would revisit the dock, where Lan and Fong had taken the boat that fateful night. Moonlight glistened across the restless waves as Hung walked along the shore, a weight pressing down on his chest. At the dock, a small wooden boat lay moored, its hull scarred with salt. The ropes looked freshly loosened, as if it had only just returned. Hung climbed aboard, sweeping his flashlight across the deck. The stench of chemicals identical to that from the warehouse rose from the wooden planks. Bending low, he found a dried, dark brown stain smeared across the floorboards, hastily scrubbed but not erased. Suddenly, a shadow fell across him. "You shouldn't be here." Fong's voice was low, heavy with threat. The beam of Hunung's flashlight cut across Fong's face, revealing eyes glittering with tension. "Fong, what exactly did you help Lan with that night?" Hung's voice was firm, unyielding. Fong smirked faintly, one hand buried in his pocket as though hiding something. "Help? I was just doing my job. Mrs. Lan told me to take waste out to sea. That's all. Nam's abroad on business." But the way Fong avoided his gaze, the way his hand clenched inside his pocket, it all fed Hunung's doubts. "Waste or people? Lin said she saw you hauling heavy bags onto the boat." Fong stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Lin talks nonsense. Don't believe her. Mrs. Lan gave me a chance to advance. I haven't done anything wrong." Oh. Yet his eyes betrayed him, flickering with the torment of a man at war with his conscience. Hung knew the truth lay beneath those evasions. He left the dock, heading into the quiet streets, until he reached a small cafe where Mai worked. The shop, tucked in a dim corner, glowed softly with warm yellow light, an oasis of calm that contrasted the storm raging in his chest. Behind the counter, Mai, her long hair tied back neatly, froze when she saw him. "Mai, what do you know about Nam?" Hung asked, placing the necklace on the table. Her eyes welled with tears as they fell on the pendant. "Nam gave me this long ago. Before the storm, he texted me. He said Lan was planning something dangerous. He wanted a divorce. But she threatened him, said he'd never leave, that if he tried, she would destroy everything, even the workers." Hunung's fist clenched. "The workers? How are they involved?" Mai shook her head, her voice breaking. "Nam said they overheard Lan and Fong talking about selling the resort. She was afraid they'd expose her." Her words pierced Hunung's mind like a blade. Lan hadn't only targeted Nam, she had dragged 67 innocent laborers into her scheme, silencing them to protect her empire. "What did Lan do to you?" Hung pressed. Mai exhaled shakily. "She sent me photos of Nam's children. She said if I didn't leave him, they'd suffer. She told me, I have money, I can make anything disappear." A chill coursed through Hung. Lan was not only ruthless, she was calculating, wielding power like a weapon, stripping away every last shred of humanity. Back at the resort, he sought out Tuan, the gardener, hoping to confirm more. Tuan was watering plants near the warehouse, his eyes darting nervously. "Tun, what do you know about the boat that night?" The man froze, glanced around as if fearing unseen eyes, then whispered, "I don't want to say, but I saw Lan and Fong pouring chemicals on the boat after the party. There were noises, groaning maybe, but I thought it was the wind. Now, I'm not so sure." Hung grabbed his shoulder. "You need to tell me the truth. Nam is my brother." Tuan lowered his head, trembling. "She paid me to stay quiet. I thought those big bags were just trash, but now I think they weren't." He didn't finish, he didn't need to. The weight of guilt was etched in every word. Late that night, Hung returned to the dock with a small knife. He pried into the seams of the old boat's wooden planks, searching. In one dark corner of the hull, he found a silver ring engraved with words, "Vern, Hung remembers Vern." It belonged to a worker. Vern, a man who had always worked diligently, always smiling, despite long hours. The ring was more than evidence. It was a reminder. The 67 were not just numbers. They were fathers, brothers, husbands, people with families, people with dreams. Hung clutched the silver ring, tears streaming down his face. Could Lan truly be so heartless as to destroy them all just to keep her secret? He called out to Lin, "You need to tell me everything. The police are coming." Lin broke down, sobbing. "I'm terrified of her. She said if I spoke, my family would suffer. But I can't live with this guilt anymore." Suddenly, Fong appeared, his voice ice cold. "Hung, don't you know when to stop?" He gripped an iron bar, his eyes filled with menace. "Lan gave you a chance, but you refused." Hung stood firm. "You betrayed Nam for money. Tell me what was in those bags." Fong sneered. "Money is everything. Lan promised me shares. I just followed orders. Nam wanted to ruin the resort. I couldn't let that happen. Hung lunged forward, shoving Fong to the ground. 68 lives, Fong. You helped kill them. Fong scrambled back to his feet, but Tuan rushed in, seizing him from behind. Enough, Fong. I won't see more blood spilled. Fong thrashed, shouting, Lan will kill us both if we talk. The tension snapped taut as Lan herself emerged, her silk dress whipping in the sea wind, her eyes burning with a cold flame. She held her phone in one hand, as if ready to summon someone with a single call. Hung, you're far too curious, she said. I know everything. Hung shot back, his voice shaking with rage. The drugged wine, the boat, the chemicals you murdered Nam, and the workers to keep your fortune, didn't you? Lan threw back her head and laughed, her voice sharp as broken glass. Nam wanted to split everything with Mai, and the workers overheard. I had to act. The storm was a gift from heaven. She stepped closer, eyes glinting with pride, not remorse. Tell me, Hung, do you want money or do you want to end up like Nam? Hung staggered back, but his resolve held firm. You'll pay for this, he said, his voice trembling with fury. Tuan pulled him aside, whispering frantically, Run! The police are coming. Hung bolted into the night, his heart pounding in terror. The truth was monstrous. Lan, armed with wealth and power, had turned the resort into a mass grave. Fong, blinded by greed, had become her accomplice. Lin and Tuan, torn by guilt, had finally chosen the side of truth. He reached Mai's cafe, breathless, and poured everything out. Mai wept. Lan wasn't just jealous. She was terrified of losing everything. Nam wanted fairness, but she chose blood. Hung gripped her hand. We'll bring her into the light. Yet even as he said it, dread clawed at him. With money and influence, could Lan still buy her way out of justice? He dialed the police, his voice trembling but resolute. A steady reply came. We're on our way. Stay calm and keep the evidence safe. Hung turned to the sea. The waves crashed against the shore, carrying with them the souls of 68 victims. Lan's ruthlessness, Fong's greed, Lin and Tuan's fractured conscience together. They revealed the monstrous face of power twisted by corruption. But truth would not stay buried forever. Hung gripped Virna's ring tighter, his heart ablaze with resolve. No matter how powerful Lan was, he would not stop until justice was served. The waves roared in the silver moonlight, as though the ocean itself longed to devour the secrets that were finally breaking free. At last, he stood before the police station, clutching Virna's ring and Nam's final note. His chest heaved with the storm of emotions inside him. Lan's words, Fong's greed, Lin and Tuan's fear they had dragged him into a labyrinth of darkness. And within that labyrinth lay the horrifying truth of his brother's death, and the 67 silenced workers whose voices still echoed in the crashing tide. Each step Hung took into the station echoed against the cold tiled floor, like the ticking heartbeat of a countdown to justice. Yet deep down, he knew Lan's wealth and influence would not let the truth emerge easily. This was no simple case. It was the beginning of a battle, conscience against greed, and Hung had sworn he would not let innocent souls remain buried in the dark waters of the sea. Inside the station, the fluorescent light cast sharp shadows across the stern face of Major Kwong, the lead investigator. Sitting behind his desk, his eyes razor sharp cut straight into Hung as though he could read his very soul. Hung, what do you have to report? Kwong asked, his voice deep, steady, and commanding, the voice of a man long accustomed to facing darkness. With trembling but resolute hands, Hung placed the silver ring and Nam's note on the desk. Major, my brother Nam and 67 workers didn't go abroad as Lan claims. I found these at the dock and the warehouse chemical stench, bloodstains, witness accounts from Lin and Tuan. I believe they were murdered and Lan orchestrated everything. Kwang narrowed his eyes, turning the ring in the light, then unfolding Nam's desperate note. He said nothing at first, but the weight in his gaze made it clear. This was far from a simple disappearance. Hung poured out every detail, the storm night party, the wine laced with powder, the boat that left in the tempest. He recounted Lin's testimony about Lan pouring a white substance into the wine, Fong hauling heavy bags onto the boat, and Nam's trembling handwriting filled with fear of his wife. Major, I also checked her computer search history. Lan looked up industrial chemicals, how to dissolve things quickly. I believe she used the storm to cover it all up. His voice broke, The image of Nam and the workers cast into the raging sea crushed the breath from his lungs. Quang nodded, scribbling rapidly before issuing a sharp order. Prepare immediately. We move on the resort tonight. Leave nothing unchecked. The police squad advanced with steady boots into the night. Patrol lights sliced through the darkness, illuminating the pristine white buildings of the resort. Once symbols of luxury, now they stood cloaked in a sinister mask. Hung followed, his heart pounding each second, carrying him closer to the truth. When they arrived, Lan was already waiting in the grand lobby, clad in a blood-red silk gown that flared beneath the crystal chandeliers. It was as though she had expected them. Major Quang, she greeted, her voice sweet but venomous, like a serpent poised to strike. What urgent matter brings you here at this hour? Quang's reply was calm, flat, devoid of warmth. We've received a report regarding the disappearance of Nam and 67 workers. We are here to search the resort, starting with the warehouse and the dock. Lan smiled faintly, but her hand tightened around the glass of wine she held, knuckles whitening. A search? You must be mistaken. Nam is abroad, the workers left willingly. Hung, are you causing trouble again? Her eyes flicked toward him sharp like daggers. Unable to hold back, Hung stepped forward. His voice shook with anger. Stop pretending, Lan. Enough. Lin, Tuan, and even Dong saw what you did that stormy night. The drugged wine, the boat, the chemicals. You can't hide forever. Lan arched her brows, but the smile never left her lips. Hung, do you really believe the lies of lowly workers? I own this resort. I don't need to stoop to such nonsense. Yet her voice wavered, and Hung knew she was struggling to maintain her perfect mask. The investigation team fanned out. Some searched the warehouse, others the dock, others Lan's office. Officer Long uncovered a canister hidden behind trash bins near the warehouse. Its label reading, Rapid Decomposition Solution. Long held it up, eyes sharp with suspicion. Major, this isn't used for raising shrimp. Quang motioned for the forensics team to test it. Within moments, they confirmed. It was an industrial chemical capable of dissolving organic matter in a short time, ideal for erasing evidence. Hung felt the ground drop beneath him. He turned toward Lan, waiting for a reaction. She remained still, her eyes cold, as though she had anticipated this all along. At the dock, Officer Hui discovered a scrap of fabric, stained with dried blood, on the deck of an old boat. Shining his flashlight, he saw deep scratch marks etched into the wood signs of a struggle, as if someone had fought desperately before being dragged away. Major, evidence of a fight here, Hu reported, voice taut with tension. Quang examined the marks closely, then faced Lan. How do you explain the blood, the scratches, and the chemicals in your warehouse? Lan shrugged, her tone steady. An old boat. The workers must have dropped something. As for the chemicals, they're for cleaning the resort. You're exaggerating. But her shifting eyes betrayed the panic she tried so hard to conceal. The forensics team turned to the massive tank in the warehouse. As they pried open the heavy metal lid, a sharp, nauseating stench wafted out, forcing even veteran officers to grimace. Inside, they found shredded pieces of worker uniforms, a few torn shoes, and a small wallet containing a family photo of a man named Tom. Hunung's heart constricted. Tom, the gentle father who had once spoken of building a home for his daughter, reduced now to fragments floating in a vat of chemicals. Lan, what did you do to them? Hung roared, unable to contain his fury. Her eyes turned like blades. Hung, you have no proof. Don't accuse me on the basis of scraps of cloth. Quang gestured for the team to continue searching. In Lan's office, behind a framed painting, they discovered a hidden safe. Inside lay a USB drive and a folder of documents. When Quang plugged in the drive, Nam's trembling voice filled the room. Lan, don't do this. The workers don't deserve to be dragged into this. I only want a divorce. I don't want the money. Then came Lan's voice, cold and sharp. You want to give it all to that girl Mai? Never. Everything must be mine. The words struck Hung like lightning. This was undeniable evidence. Yet Lan stood unmoved, her voice calm, almost playful. Just a marital quarrel. Nam was dramatic, always saying such things. Her tone was soft as silk, yet as dangerous as a knife hidden beneath it. Moments later, officers dragged in Fong, his wrists shackled after his violent clash with Hung and Tuan. His head hung low, shame clouding his eyes. Major, I didn't want this. Lan forced me. She promised me shares if I helped. Quang's voice was stern, commanding. Help with what? Speak clearly. Fong trembled. I piloted the boat that stormy night, hauled the big bags offshore. Lon said they were trash, but I heard groans, human groans. I was terrified, but she threatened to destroy me if I refused. Hung clenched his fists, glaring at Fong. You knew they were people and you still went through with it. Tears streamed down Fong's face. I needed the money. Lon promised she'd change my life. His selfishness, his weakness, it carved a deeper wound into Hunung's heart. It wasn't only about Nam anymore. It was about how greed could twist ordinary people into monsters. Lin and Tuan were brought in as witnesses. Lin's eyes were swollen red as she spoke. I saw Lan mix white powder into the wine before the party. She said it was seasoning, but I suspected. After the party, everyone collapsed and Lan laughed, saying, "Now it's peaceful." I was terrified, so I kept silent. Tuan continued, his voice trembling. I helped carry the bags onto the boat. I thought it was trash. But when I saw the chemicals, I knew I was wrong. Lan paid me to stay quiet. Quang listened intently, his sharp gaze never leaving Lan. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Lan scoffed, her smile tight. They're fabricating lies to slander me. I'm the victim of envy. But her composure began to crack when Quang revealed the USB and the stack of documents. Inside the safe lay fraudulent contracts, showing Lan had quietly transferred ownership of the resort into her own name before Nam's disappearance. Among them was a handwritten note. After the storm, no one will suspect. The property is safe. Hong read the words, his chest tightening like a vice. Lan hadn't only killed for jealousy. She had slaughtered 68 lives for bottomless greed, sacrificing even family to protect her empire. Quang faced her. You planned carefully, but you forgot the truth always finds its way out. Lan straightened, her eyes still cold. Major, you have nothing but scraps of cloth and words. I have money, I have lawyers, you'll regret this. Suddenly, Dung, the young worker, stepped forward, holding an old phone. Major, I found this in the warehouse. It's from one of the workers. There's a video. Quang played it. The screen flickered, showing Nam and the workers at the party, laughing, drinking, before collapsing one by one after sipping their wine. Then Lan's voice cut through, chilling and unmistakable. Sleep well. No one will ever find out. Hoon's breath caught in his throat. He could not believe what he saw. The video, short as it was, shattered every lie. He turned to Lan, searching for words, but for the first time her lips pressed tight, her eyes flashing raw panic. Arrest them both, Quang ordered. Lan shrieked as the officer seized her. You can't touch me. I own this resort. I have power. But her protests dissolved beneath the snap of handcuffs. Fong hung his head, too ashamed to meet anyone's gaze. Hung stood frozen, watching as Lan was led away. His chest ached with grief. He thought of Nam's 2 children, innocent, now orphaned, robbed of both father and mother. Lan's cruelty hadn't stopped at murder. She had shattered trust, destroyed families, and turned a shining resort into a mass grave. Quang placed a firm hand on Hunung's shoulder. We'll search for the bodies. Justice will be served. But prepare yourself, the truth may hurt more than you imagine. The investigation continued through the night. Police cast nets into the dark waters offshore, where Lan and Fong had dumped the heavy bags. The storm had erased much, but fragments emerged, shredded cloth, personal belongings, pieces that matched the workers' uniforms. On the shore, Hung stood staring at the restless waves. To him, it felt as though the voices of Nam and the others were rising from the sea itself, crying out for justice, demanding to be heard. Hung thought of Mai, Nam's former lover, and dialed her number. Mai, the police found the evidence. Lan was behind it all. Mai's sobs carried through the line. Nam only wanted to live honestly. How could she be so cruel? Hung didn't answer. He only tightened his grip on VNJ's silver ring, his heart swelling with resolve. No matter how powerful Lan was, justice would not let her escape. That night, the sea roared like a witness crying out for the forgotten souls beneath its furious waves. Hung stood on the sand, his eyes heavy with sorrow as he gazed out at the ocean, the same ocean that had swallowed Nam and 67 workers during the 5th storm. In his hands were Virna's ring and Nam's notebook, relentless reminders of Lan's merciless crime. The evidence gathered from the warehouse, the dock, and the testimonies of Lin, Tuan, and Durung had ripped open the darkness of the woman's soul. But what could drive Lan, a wealthy businesswoman, a mother of two, to weave such a monstrous plan? Hung felt as if he stood at the edge of a cliff, each step forward revealing an even darker abyss. For Major Kwong and his team, this investigation was no longer a missing persons case. It was a battle to strip away Lan's perfect mask, exposing the greed and selfishness that had devoured her humanity. Inside the interrogation room at the police station, the cold light of a single bulb cast harsh shadows across Lan's sharp, icy features. She sat across from Major Kwang, her fingers interlocked on the table, eyes unflinching, as if she had rehearsed for every question. Beside her, Fong sat in handcuffs, head bowed, sweat beading on his forehead, his eyes betraying both panic and regret. From outside the one-way glass, Hung watched, his heart pounding as Kwang's voice cut through the silence. Lan, we have evidence. The chemicals in the warehouse, the blood on the boat, the recording of Nam's voice. You mixed sedatives into the wine that night, didn't you? His tone was calm but sharp like a blade slicing through the air. Lan's lips curved into a faint, mist-thin smile. Major, you're basing this on the jealous lies of disgruntled staff. I merely hosted a party to encourage the workers. Nam took them on a trip afterward, nothing unusual. Hung clenched his fists, fury boiling inside him. Lan's calm denial, her refusal to acknowledge the horror, it made him want to storm the room and scream. But he forced himself to stay back. Kwang would not let her slip away. Kwang placed the USB on the table and pressed play. Nam's trembling voice filled the room. Lan, don't do this. The workers don't deserve to be involved. Then came Lan's voice, cold as ice. You want to give the property to Mai? Never. Everything is mine. The sound cut into Hung like a knife. He could see his brother's desperate face, pleading with his wife. Lan's eyes flicked toward the speaker. For a brief instant, her mask cracked, but she quickly regained her composure. A normal marital quarrel. Major, you can't convict me over a few words taken out of context. Kwang didn't flinch. He laid the forged contracts on the table, retrieved from Lan's safe, the ones transferring ownership of the resort to her name before Nam's disappearance. On top lay the handwritten note. After the storm, no one will suspect. The property is safe. You planned this for a long time, didn't you? Kwang pressed, his voice like iron. Transferring assets before Nam vanished. Writing this note, how do you explain it? Lan let out a brittle laugh, but her hand trembled slightly, just enough to betray the fear beneath. It was business planning. I was protecting family property. Nam wanted a divorce. He wanted to split everything with someone else. I couldn't allow it. Outside the glass, Hu Nung's chest tightened in agony. Lan hadn't only killed out of jealousy, she had killed out of boundless greed, desperate to keep hold of the empire she feared losing. But what chilled Hung most was not just Lan's betrayal of his brother. It was her ruthless willingness to drag 67 innocent workers into death, just to silence them. Kwang's voice cut through the room, flat and unforgiving. We recovered a video from Tom's phone, a worker. You appear on screen saying, sleep well, no one will ever find out. You laced the wine with sedatives, then had them taken out to sea, didn't you? Lan sat upright, her gaze icy. The video could be fake. I know nothing about sedatives. The workers left because they wanted to. I didn't force anyone. But her voice faltered, and Hung knew she was clinging to the last crumbling wall of denial. Kwang laid down more evidence. The search history from Lan's computer queries like rapid decomposition chemicals and how to erase traces of a body. You researched it thoroughly, Lan. This wasn't chance. Kwang's eyes never left her face. For the first time, Lan lowered her head, silent. Watching from behind the one-way glass, Hung felt a shiver. The woman sitting there, once his sister-in-law, once the smiling mother holding Nam's children, now revealed her true face. Cold, calculating, stripped of humanity. Hung turned to Durung beside him. Durung, is there more you haven't said? Durung sighed, his voice trembling. I saw her burn papers after the storm. She said they were old invoices, but I smelled the same chemicals as on the boat. I was too afraid to ask. Kwang ordered Lin into the room. She entered with swollen, tear-streaked eyes, but her gaze was steady. Tell us what you saw that night, Kwang said. Lin drew a shaky breath but spoke clearly. I saw her pour white powder into the wine decanter. She said it was seasoning to enhance the flavor, but I doubted it. When everyone drank, they laughed, then collapsed one by one. Lan stood there, watching, and said, It's done. Now it's peaceful. I wanted to go to the police, but she threatened to harm my family. From behind the glass, Hung felt his chest wrench. Lan's cruelty was not just in the murders, it was in how she manipulated the weak, bending them with fear and money, crushing their conscience under her will. Next came Twun, the gardener, summoned into the room. His eyes brimmed with regret as he faced Quang. Tun, what did you help Lan do on the night of the storm? Twun lowered his head, his voice cracking. I carried the big bags onto the boat. I thought it was trash. She paid me and told me to stay quiet. But when I saw the chemicals in the warehouse, I knew I was wrong. I heard groaning on the boat, but I didn't dare ask. I regret it, Major. Hunung's emotions churned anger at Tuan's weakness, yet pity for his broken conscience. The poor gardener had been ensnared by Lan's greed, but in the end, his humanity had won out. Finally, Quang turned to Fong, who sat drenched in sweat, head bowed. Fong, you already admitted piloting the boat for Lan. Now tell us, what exactly did she do to Nam and the workers? Fong lifted his eyes, wild with fear. Lan forced me. She said if Nam divorced her, the resort would be lost. The workers overheard the plan to sell assets, so she decided to silence them. I drove the boat with the bags on board. I heard groaning, but Lan said it was the wind. She poured chemicals on the bags to make them sink faster. Hung clenched his fist, his chest tightening as the image of Nam and the 67 workers being hurled into the sea during the storm suffocated him. Fong's voice shook as he continued. Lan promised me shares. I needed the money for my family. I was wrong. Hung could no longer restrain himself. He stepped into the interrogation room, his eyes blazing as he stared at Lan. Why, Lan? Nam loved you. Your 2 children needed you. Why kill him and 67 innocent workers? Lan met his gaze, her eyes devoid of remorse. Nam wanted to split everything with Mai. He wanted to destroy what I built. The workers knew too much. I had no choice. Money is everything, Hung. You'll never understand. Her words cut into him like a knife. This wasn't only greed, it was obsession with power, a willingness to sacrifice anything, anyone, to protect her empire. Quang presented another piece of evidence, a digital journal recovered from Lan's computer. It listed each step of her plan. Day before storm, prepare sedatives. Storm night, use boat number 3. Chemicals ready. After storm, no suspicion. Reading it, Hung felt ice crawl up his spine. She had calculated everything, drugging the wine, exploiting the storm, disposing of Nam and the workers in one night of horror. Quang's voice cut through the silence. You researched decomposition methods, ways to mask the smell. This was a premeditated mass killing. But you forgot one thing. Justice leaves nothing hidden. Lan let out a dry, lifeless laugh. Justice? Major, you think I wasn't prepared? I have money, I have lawyers. None of this will hold in court. But her voice quivered, and Hung saw the cracks in her armor. Quang pressed further. We found your emails to a chemical supplier ordering rapid decomposition agents days before the storm. You also contacted a hacker to erase your search history. He gave us the data. Lan's face drained of color. For the first time, her mask slipped. She lowered her head, silent, trapped. Mai was brought in to testify. Her eyes glistened with tears, but her voice was steady. Nam wanted a divorce. Lan had changed, consumed by money. She threatened me and my family if I contacted him. Before the storm, Nam texted me. He said Lan was planning something dangerous. I never imagined she'd go this far. Hunung's chest ached. His rage burned at the truth. Lan had not only killed Nam out of jealousy, but out of fear of losing control, of losing her throne. Then another figure stepped forward. Hien, a lawyer who had once worked for Lan. She carried a stack of documents, her face torn with guilt. Major, I helped draft the forged contracts that transferred assets to her name. She promised me a fortune, but I didn't know she planned murder. When I heard about the disappearances, I checked her emails and saw the orders for chemicals. Hien's voice trembled. I wanted to stop, but Lan threatened to destroy my career. Hunung's gut twisted. Lan hadn't only manipulated workers like Lin and Twun, she had been even educated professionals like Hien to her will, weaponizing money to turn them into accomplices. Quang's voice hardened as he turned back to Lan. You didn't just kill Nam to keep the resort. You silenced 67 workers to bury the truth. Isn't that right? Lan's eyes locked onto his, still chillingly devoid of regret. They knew too much. If Nam divorced me, they would expose the sale of the resort. I couldn't let everything collapse. I did it for my children, for my family. You lie! Hung's roar shook the interrogation room, echoing like thunder. For your children, you killed their father. You destroyed everything they had. Lan turned sharply to Hung, her voice like ice. You don't understand. I built this resort. Nam wanted to share it with someone else. I would never allow it. Her cruelty revealed itself in every word. She didn't only kill for greed, she justified it as if it were for her children, for her family. Hu-Ung's thoughts burned with the image of Nam's two little ones innocent, believing their father was away on business, never knowing their mother had murdered him. He looked at Lan and felt as though he were staring at a stranger, not the sister-in-law he once respected. Quang pressed on. We've contacted the families of the workers. None of them heard a word after the storm. Some families recovered personal belongings that washed ashore items matching the uniforms from your resort. Lan said nothing, but her eyes drifted, as though she knew the walls were closing in. Heen stepped forward with another piece of evidence, a message Lan had sent her before the storm. After tonight, everything will be clean. No one will stop me. Hung read it, his chest tightening like a vice. This wasn't impulse, it was premeditation. Lan had prepared every step, turning the resort into a slaughterhouse. He thought of Tom, of Viren, and the other workers' men who had only wanted to earn a living, now reduced to victims of her greed. Hung turned to Fong, fury in his eyes. You knew all of it, why didn't you stop her? Fong wept openly. I was afraid. She threatened to ruin my family. I was wrong, Hung. I was so wrong. Quang ordered further analysis of the samples from the warehouse and boat. The results confirmed it. The solution could break down organic matter within hours. It explained why no bodies had been found. Hung stood frozen, imagining Lan and Fong aboard the boat, tossing human lives into the raging storm with no trace of mercy. He thought of Nam, his brother, who had always put family first, only to be betrayed by the very woman he trusted. Quang's voice was iron. Lan, you planned everything, but you forgot the conscience of people like Lin, Tuan, and Hien would not let you escape. Justice always comes. Finally, Lan spoke, her voice hoarse. I did it for my children. Nam wanted to take everything from me. I had no choice. But her words carried no weight anymore. Hung stepped closer, his voice breaking. You say it was for your children, but you killed their father. You murdered 67 innocent lives. You're not a mother, you're a monster. For the first time, Lan's eyes flickered with panic, but she turned her face away, refusing to answer. The investigative team continued searching her office. They uncovered a hidden laptop in a drawer. On it were emails Lan had sent to an overseas partner, asking about methods to dispose of organic waste at sea. Hung shuddered. She hadn't only plotted murder, she had planned to erase the past entirely, to sell the resort after the bodies were gone, to build her empire anew on the bones of the dead. And Nam's children now, they would grow up with nothing but grief, robbed of both parents. Lan had not only murdered lives, she had murdered trust, destroyed families, and extinguished hope. Then Mai entered, holding one of Nam's old phones. Her voice trembled. I found this among his things. It has his last message to me. Mai, if I don't come back, tell Hung to seek the truth. He knew Lan was dangerous, but he couldn't stop her in time. Hung pulled Mai into his arms as tears streamed down his face. Nam had tried to warn them, but Lan's greed had moved faster. Quang's voice rang steady, resolute. We have enough evidence. Lan will stand trial. But Hung braced himself, for he knew the story was not yet over. Leaving the interrogation room, his heart weighed heavy. Lan, once draped in wealth and prestige, had turned the resort into a mass grave, all to protect her fortune and power. Fong, Lin, Tuan, Hien each had been pulled into her orbit, twisted by her manipulation. Yet in the end, conscience had led them back to the truth. Hu-Ung's gaze drifted to the sea, where the waves still crashed like whispered voices of Nam and the workers. Justice was approaching, but the grief of 68 families would never be erased. Beneath a gray sky, where restless tides broke upon the shore as though carrying the cries of unsettled souls, the courtroom fell into heavy silence. Time itself seemed to hold its breath as justice prepared to speak. On the 15th of October, 2023, Pale light filtered through high windows, falling across Lan's face. Once the embodiment of wealth and power, she now stood at the defendant's dock, facing judgment for her monstrous crimes. From a corner seat, Hung watched her intently. The sister-in-law he had once respected, now revealed as a woman capable of sinking 68 lives just to clutch her empire tighter. The evidence was irrefutable. Nam's trembling recording, Tum's incriminating video, the testimonies of Lin, Tuan, and Heen. Together they had stripped away the last illusions of Lan's innocence. And yet for Hung, no verdict could heal the wound of losing his brother or mend the shattering of a family. This was not only a story of crime, it was a lesson one of morality, humanity, and the relentless force of justice, carried forward by the tireless officers of Vietnam's police, who had fought to bring light into society's darkest corners. Lan stood there in a black silk dress, her hands clasped tightly as if to preserve the last shred of dignity. Her eyes were cold, empty, no tears, no remorse. As if she still believed money and power could smother her sins, the judge's voice thundered, solemn and unyielding. Lan, the court sentences you to death for premeditated murder, destruction of evidence, and causing irreparable harm to 68 victims, including Nam and 67 workers. Each word struck like a hammer, shattering the polished mask she had so carefully crafted. Hung searched her face for a reaction, but Lan only lowered her head, lips pressed tight, accepting her fate without defense, without plea. Phong was convicted as an accomplice and sentenced to life imprisonment. His eyes brimmed with regret as he was led away, muttering, "I was wrong, Hung. Money blinded me." The spectators' whispers rippled across the courtroom like a faint wave, but in Hunung's heart, only a hollow ache remained. He turned to the corner where Nam's children sat, tears brimming in their eyes as they watched their mother taken away. They were too young to grasp why their family had collapsed, too innocent to understand how the woman who once cradled them could murder their father. Hung pulled the two children into his arms, but their eyes were vacant, as if their souls had been swept away with the storm. The lesson of morality stood clear. Greed can transform a mother, a wife, into the destroyer of her own family. And Hung wondered, had Lan ever once thought of her children when she crafted her cruel plan? Did she ever understand that money could never buy love, nor heal the wounded souls of innocent children? Major Kwong stood beside Hung, his gaze somber yet steady. "Hung, we have done all we could. Justice has been served, but the pain for you and for the families of the victims will take time to heal." Hung nodded, his voice breaking. "Thank you, Major. Without you, the truth would have remained buried beneath the sea." Kwong placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "We, the officers of Vietnam's police, never surrender to crime. Let this be a lesson to all. Living with honesty and obeying the law is the only way to protect public well-being and preserve the morals of society." His words were like a flame, lighting hope within Hunung's heart, reminding him that no matter how strong the darkness, the light of justice always finds its way. Mai, Nam's former love, entered the courtroom, carrying a small bouquet of white flowers, a quiet tribute. She looked at Hung, her voice trembling. Nam only wanted to live truthfully. He never deserved such a fate. Hung clasped her hand, feeling the shared grief between them. "Mai, he would be proud of you for helping uncover the truth. But Lan, why did she go so far?" Tears streaked down Mai's cheeks. It wasn't just fear of losing wealth. She was terrified of losing her reputation, of being seen as a failure. She chose blood to preserve her illusion of glory. Her words made Hung reflect on the crushing weight of status in modern society, a force that could corrupt, erode humanity, and push someone to betray their own soul just to protect an image. It was a bitter lesson, to live by moral values, not by hollow vanity. Outside the courtroom, Lin and Tuan, the key witnesses, stood together, eyes heavy with remorse but softened with relief. Lin whispered, "Hung, I was afraid, but speaking the truth was the only way to reclaim my peace of mind." Tuan nodded. "I took her money, but my conscience never let me rest. I want to live honestly, so my child won't grow up ashamed of me." Hung looked at them and felt a flicker of hope. Though once caught in Lan's spiral of greed, they had chosen justice in the end, proving that conscience could still triumph. This too was a lesson. Moral education is not just words, it is the courage to face one's mistakes. Hien, the lawyer who had once helped Lan forge contracts, stepped toward Hung. I'm sorry, Hung. I let money blind me, but when I realized the truth, I couldn't keep covering for her. She paused, her voice trembling. Lan threatened to destroy my career if I betrayed her, but I learned that reputation means nothing compared to the health of one's conscience. Hung nodded, sensing the same struggle in Hien that he had seen in Lin and Tuan. All three had been manipulated, but ultimately chose the path of integrity. It was a precious reminder. Money and power may corrupt for a time, but only morality can bring true peace. In the courtroom, the judge continued to read the supplementary ruling. Lan abused her wealth and influence to conceal her crimes, but her actions did not only destroy one family, they inflicted deep wounds on society itself. The words struck Hung like a blade. Lan had not only murdered Nam and 67 workers, she had planted fear, shattered trust, and scarred the very fabric of human values. He thought of the victims' families, the wives who had lost husbands, the children who had lost fathers, and realized the greatest lesson from this case was the law of cause and effect. Cruel actions always demand a price, not only before the courts, but before one's own conscience. Stepping out of the courtroom, Hu Nung's eyes turned to the sea, where the waves still rolled steadily. He thought of Nam, the brother who had always lived for his family, and of workers like Tom and Viren, men who only wanted to earn an honest living. Lan's cruelty was more than a personal crime. It was a warning about the corruption of modern society, where the weight of status and the lure of greed could strip a person of their humanity. Hung wondered if society could do more to prevent such tragedies, whether moral education and legal awareness might help people resist the temptation of power. It was not only his question, it was for everyone who had witnessed the story. Major Kwong approached, handing Hung a small box. These were found on the shoreline. They belonged to Nam, his watch. Hung opened the box. Inside lay Nam's silver watch, scarred by salt water. He gripped it tightly, tears falling down his face. Brother, I uncovered the truth for you, but the cost was far too great. Kwong placed a hand on his shoulder. Hung, we police officers do not serve justice for its own sake. We fight to protect the moral health of society. This case is a lesson to all. Living honestly and obeying the law is the only way to preserve humanity and peace. Hung turned to see Nam's children, their small hands clasped in Mai's. Their wide, questioning eyes met his. Uncle Hung, what did Mother do wrong? Why was she taken away? Hung knelt down, pulling them into his arms, his voice breaking. Your mother made mistakes, but I will take care of you. We will live well so your father can be proud. He knew justice had been carried out, but the pain for these children would never truly fade. The lesson of humanity was clear. Punishing crime was not enough. Society must also nurture love, kindness, and decency in the younger generation, so they would not repeat the failures of the past. As Lan was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she glanced back for the first time with a flicker of regret. Her hoarse voice broke the silence. Hung, I only wanted to protect my children. Hung shook his head. You tried to protect them by killing their father. You chose wrong. Lan lowered her head and walked on, carrying the weight of her unforgivable crimes. Hung thought again of cause and effect. What Lan had sown, she now reaped, but at the cost of a shattered family and the grief of 68 others. He stepped outside. The sunlight fell across his face, but could not banish the sorrow. Pulling out his phone, he called Mai. Mai, we have to do something for the workers' families. They need to know the truth. They need comfort. On the line, Mai's voice trembled, but she nodded in agreement. Hung, I'll help you. Nam would want us to do the right thing. Hung felt a spark of hope, small but real. The knowledge of humanity, of kindness, would be the light guiding them through this darkness. This story was not only about a crime, but also a warning, a reflection of the invisible pressures of modern society, the crushing weight of reputation, the greed for money, and the silent violence within families. Lan, with her wealth and power, chose the wrong path. Her downfall is a reminder that nothing is more precious than mental well-being and morality. The silent heroes, the officers of Vietnam's police force, like Major Kwong, stood as guardians of justice, tirelessly fighting to bring light into society's darkest corners. Hung looked out to the sea, where the waves kept breaking on the shore, whispering a reminder, no matter how carefully hidden, crime will never escape the path of justice. Thank you for joining us on this journey through a chilling story of truth and deception. This case serves as a profound lesson in moral education, legal awareness, and mental health, a reminder to live with integrity, to respect the law, and to cherish human compassion. Let us honor the officers of Vietnam's police, those who never shy away from hardship, who protect justice, and bring peace to society. If this story made you reflect, please subscribe to Whispers in the Dark and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next gripping story. We wish you good health, joy in life, and peace each and every day. Until next time, farewell, see you again on the next journey into truth. Note: this story is a work of fiction, created for entertainment and social awareness. It honors the dedication of Vietnam's police officers and carries a humanistic message promoting morality, compassion, and respect for the law. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental